We all know about Amazon's popularity in the world of book publishing and selling. Indeed, for many of us, this is the first port of call when we want to buy a book, right? Or even for all the writers, many writers, in fact, it's ditto. They want to publish their books and they think of Amazon and Kindle Direct Publishing. But the thing is, did you know that a homegrown family-run business based in Nashville, USA, has played an equally important role, a pivotal role, in fact, over the decades in the way the book publishing world has transformed? I bet you didn't know that. We're talking about the Ingram Content Group. It's been doing this very quietly, far more quietly than Amazon, of course. And our next session is going to focus on this company and a very interesting book written on it. The conversation is titled The Ingram Story. And to anchor this chat and to introduce our speaker, Keel Hunt, I welcome Karthika V K. Karthika, hi. Am I audible, Karthika? Hi, and welcome to the fest. Karthika is publisher.
Thank you for having me at the fest.
Lovely. Oh, it's all our pleasure. Let me introduce you. Karthika is publisher, Westland Publications Private Limited. She joined publishing in 1996 as an editorial assistant at Penguin Books India, and then moved to HarperCollins India as publisher in 2006. Patil, Anuja Chauhan, Josie Joseph, Manu Joseph, etc. At Westland, she has led the launch of a new imprint called Context that publishes literary fiction and political nonfiction. Since its launch in February 2018, Context has published books by Amrita Mahale, Anita Nair, Aparna Jain, Apupan, Arundhati Subramaniam, Devpriya Roy, Kapil Komireddy, Karthika Nair, and a host of other stalwart writers. Karthika, welcome again. Wonderful having you with us. And over to you. Please introduce Keel and take it from there.
Yeah. Is Keel on here or?
I think he's come.
See him. Yeah, maybe he hasn't joined yet. Should we wait?
I did think that I caught a glimpse of his screen. Maybe he's just disappeared again. Maybe there's an internet problem, connection problem.
Hey, Keel, are you around? It should be Hunt for you, which is a very bad pun on your name, of course.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe we're a little early, actually, because it's exactly 5:30 now.
Yes, but he did try logging in. I distinctly remember seeing that, 2 minutes ago, 3 minutes ago, I think. And then he dropped off again, I think. So yes, the hunt for Keel Hunt. So how are things with you? Sorry? No, so while we wait, why don't you tell us about Westland and how you see from your perch what's happening now, pandemic, post-pandemic, how are you guys tackling
you know
this?
what?
Yes?
Sure. Actually, it's a good context maybe to set for people. I don't know who's going to be listening to this conversation, but given the amount of time we have in a session, it may perhaps make sense to also tell you a little bit about why Ingram matters so much in our world. I mean, we're talking about Keel's book on the Ingram business. So the thing that Ingram does not do is actually make a huge impact in India, as far as I know. I'd like Keel to tell us a little bit more about that and if they have any plans to do more. But the problems he outlines about publishing and the book industry in America in the 90s, when both Ingram and Amazon began business, is in many ways the way things are in India even now.
Okay.
We're still struggling with basic issues of distribution, which is very sluggish. We have issues with supply chain, with transport, with simple things like packaging. You want to get a gorgeously illustrated, beautifully produced coffee table book from one end of this country to another, and you will find that half the copies might arrive damaged because we still haven't got the basics right about really good packaging, about careful transportation, timely transportation. So at every level, there is an issue. And what Ingram did in the US was cut through all of that, which very similar issues they had there, and decided to go digital and provide digital publishing services to companies, to small retailers, to publishers, to all of these people, who then got on a basic inventory, much like Amazon did later, and ordered their books instantly, not having to go through systems. So what we really need, and if anybody at this festival who wishes to invest in what might be a good business opportunity sees this, this is what India lacks. We just do not have systems in place to make book publishing more adventurous, more attractive, more efficient. And that lack of inefficiency, that lack of efficiency is what is driving half the problems in this country at the moment. So I was hoping that Keel's take on what they did in the US and Ingram did might actually appeal to listeners here for that reason.
Absolutely. It'll be very relevant to us because you're right. A lot of these problems have been plaguing us. And I think while Ingram doesn't have a large footprint here, there are lessons to be learned from what it has done for the USA,
Exactly.
And when you speak of the inefficiencies and the problems, Karthika, I think it should also become, or one of the things we need to do is to make this very accessible and attractive to the writing audience, to writers in general, to make it more accessible, to make it more, friendly, also writer friendly. In the sense that, the opportunity to access a publisher, to get the book out there, and to access quality stuff.
I don't think the attractiveness and friendliness that, yes, that's true. But the reader only seems to be interested in pricing and discounting. And that is the crux of the problem as well.
That's a problem, yes.
There is a mismatch of expectations at every level. The publisher wants to bring great content, wants to bring affordable content to the reader. The reader is saying, yes, but how much does it cost? And is it really worth my while? And when you mention the post-pandemic world, this is a real problem. Why would a book that is written for pleasure or written with the intent of giving pleasure become a priority when you have school fees to pay and jobs to save and all kinds of dire essential things to do? Books are going to lose out. And that's, I think, what we're seeing now, that the market is expanding for school textbooks, for educational books, as it always has in India. Whereas straight publishing, which is what the kind of publishing we do, which is fiction, non-fiction, poetry, all things that we think bring meaning to this world, they're not priority. People don't want to spend on them. And so then we have that attached problem, which is really exploding, which is of digital piracy and physical book piracy. Which means that legitimate business is being driven to despair by the fact that I'm sure you're one of those who received a PDF 2 days before Obama's book launched, for instance, on your phone with the entire book free, right? It's what is happening. People just don't see the need to protect copyright or protect rights of any sort. So there's just a host of issues that are plaguing the industry at the moment. And it'd be fun to hear what Keel has to say about how America got through that, because we are still in many ways in the 90s, and they then had Ingram and Amazon and people like that step up and make their transformation possible. We haven't had that happen to us yet.
Yes. In fact, America has a lot of other boutique, digital publishing companies, digital publishing firms, book publishing firms, which I think have a strong regional imprint within America, within the USA, and are doing good work there. And and I hear from.
See, that's the other primary.
No, go on. Go on. Yes, go on.
No, I was just going to say that very thing that you pointed out is like touching a sore problem here, because in the post-pandemic world, America, the UK, Australia, all the other English-speaking nations saw book publishing growing. They couldn't keep up with the print runs. They couldn't keep up with the supply requirements. And in India, we saw numbers plunge that books have in our countries, and the way we respond to books or our need for books, very, very different.
I've lost. Sorry, are you
there? Did you lose me?
Yeah, I lost you for about a couple of minutes. You took off from what I said, and you started talking about English-speaking nations, other countries.
I was just sorry, my connection seems to be unstable today. But I was saying that the numbers really went up in other English reading countries. Their businesses grew. There were publishers who said that they couldn't print fast enough to keep up with the demand. And in India, we saw numbers plunge. All the publishing businesses over the last couple of years have seen, I'm talking about trade publishing, have seen percentage, sometimes double-digit drops in business revenue. So it's been bad. It's a whole different place that books occupy in our culture, in our society
hierarchy
at the moment.
And in the hierarchy of needs and what we can.
Exactly. Yeah.
But at the same time, I think self-publishing has really taken off. I hear reports saying, yes, in India.
Yes. And that's a good thing, because the more publishing shrinks into a few publishing houses that cater to, the demand, then there's a longer sort of time lag between the book coming in as a manuscript and being published. And there are only so many books these publishers can take on. Yeah. So finally, there is this space where people can just go upload their books, do their own marketing. And now with social media and other abilities that they might have to market books themselves, there's a clear space that feeds into the ecosystem really positively, I think. I'm really happy that's happening well.
Lovely, wonderful. And Keel is here with us.
Keel is here.
Hi, Keel.
Just in time.
Hey, Keel.
We were just about to launch a hunt for you otherwise.
Yeah, I will say good morning from Nashville.
Good morning, but we can't see you.
Oh.
I can see him.
I can see you.
That's strange. I can't see you. I just see like this black. Okay, let me see if there's any way to... No, I just don't see you.
Karthika, maybe you can turn on your gallery view. That could help.
Okay, I think I have it on because I can see the two of us so far when we've been chatting. I just can't see Keel having joined. Keel, maybe if you keep talking, doesn't matter. Let's not waste time. I will.
Yeah, maybe you could just start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lovely. So I hand Keel over to you, Karthika, and please.
Okay, and I will speak blindly to you, Keel, since I can't see you, but you can see me, so this is unfair advantage. But welcome to the Bangalore Festival. I wish you were here in person. I wish I could meet you in person because there's so much I'd like to talk to you about after reading your book. It's a really good book about a business that I think a lot of people don't understand, or perhaps did not really get to try and understand even. So reading this book, there were lots of revelations, lots of moments where I felt, right, this is how it happened. And I'm glad to finally know so Keel Hunt is a writer who has written many other books which have nothing to date that he comes from, I think, which is Tennessee. Yes. And he has then gone on, and he's an advisor to the business which he has now written about, that is the Ingram family business. And this book is called The Family Business. I'm going to hold this up in case someone's going to want to see it. It's ulta, isn't it? Because I'm holding it anyway. And Keel, because it took a few minutes before you joined, we were just chatting about the fact that in many ways in India, we are in that place that you mentioned the US was in the 90s, which is difficult distribution systems, sluggish logistics, all kinds of problems that still haven't gone away in India. Of course, you exist. Of course, Amazon exists. Of course, lots of other things have happened to make things better. And yet it's very far from being in a really good place. So I would really like everyone who's going to listen to this conversation to know how that journey took place in the US and how Ingram was crucial to this evolution that happened. So will you talk us through this a little bit about the beginnings and how Ingram then became the crucial game changer in the book industry?
Yes, thank you. Well,
I can see you now.
Okay, good. This began as a conversation in the spring of 2018. And the discussion was mainly how Ingram was coming within a couple of years to its 50th birthday. And we talked about different ways to observe that milestone. And at the table, Mike Shatskin, who is on another aspect of the program today with you, actually came up with the idea that a book about Ingram Book Company, the name it began as, might be very interesting and a suitable way to capture the story. And I was asked to take that on. The way the story began was and by 1970s, there was an entity called Ingram Book Company. It had begun as a state textbook depository, supplying books to schools and libraries, and then it sort of reached the stage of becoming a vehicle for growth and a part of the parent company, Ingram Industries. And the main thing I would say about this story is that as will any business who lasts for 50 years, it went through different phases. It began small, and it became, as we now know, quite large, and in fact a global business. But this also, I realized, was a story that had never been told in its fullness, and I guess if you would say I specialize in any particular kind of story, it would be nonfiction. I think in many cases, truth is stranger than fiction, and I've always enjoyed going back to my early career as a journalist, the interview process and getting to know people and attempting to make complex stories understandable and accessible for lay people, and this turned out to be that. But the story had never really been told. Ingram's preference over the 50 years has always been to let any public attention go to the benefit of their customers, not themselves, and that's been a pretty good, almost disciplined practice within the business. So Ingram also came on to the public, or came on eventually as a very private company in terms of its ownership, in terms of the preferences of its executives, and so the story really was never told until now. And I think that's one of the reasons you're seeing this book, The Family Business, become as popular as it is, and of course I'm grateful for that. Also, to make that happen, though, it was necessary for to kind of go behind the veil, and for the Ingram family members and Ingram executives to be willing to tell that story. And I do want to point out that over the course of this project, just the past 2 or 3 years, there was never a question that I put to Mr. John Ingram, the chairman and CEO now of that business, that he declined to answer. And I think that's a great credit to him. He understood the potential interest there would be in the story, and it was really a joy to work on.
Right. Well, it's got lots of moments of cliffhanger action. So clearly it was a very bumpy ride. And some of those stories really stand out. They're like case studies of how things can work or cannot work. And one of the stories in that of the near acquisition or near merger, actually, with Barnes & Noble is a really interesting story as well. Maybe would you be able to talk to us about that, and also a little bit then, because it's interesting to see how the government and systems work alongside in the US to allow or not allow such practices. So I think it would be interesting to hear that from you, of how it happened, why it did not happen also.
Right. Well, because of changes in the book trade, the book industry, as we call it, there had been fundamental shifts in how that book trade worked and how suppliers related to consumers eventually. And of course, in the book trade, on the front end, we might say, are publishers and who do the important work of bringing the vital content from authors to the market. And in our country, and we have very important regulatory laws that govern that there should not be instances of consolidation to the extent that it causes a restraint of trade, as the law says. And so the original idea, which began in private business discussions between Ingram, Mr. John Ingram, and his associates on the one hand, and Mr. Luminaries and his associates at Barnes and Noble on the other side of the table, that it seemed smart for them to come together. That as we describe in the book, that the role of the distributor, the wholesaler of books, that is the entity between the publisher on the one end and retailers and librarians on the other end, that because of digitization and these sort of innovations in the book trade, that its role, one of middleman, so to speak, was going to be squeezed. It might come to an end. And so it made sense to these parties to undertake discussions about how to come together. And of course, that needed to receive a government approval. It ultimately did not. But along the way, and very quickly in the process, it became quite controversial. Booksellers, certainly through their national association, questioned it quite loudly, that it would be harmful to their role in the trade. And so it became very quickly a very public dispute. And eventually, in my view, this helped to influence the regulators, and they never approved. And there came a point then, within a few months actually, that the principal parties, Barnes and Noble on the one hand and Ingram on the other, made a determination, let's just pull this back. Let's not do this. So in a technical sense, that's where it ended. But of course, the pressures that were coming to bear on a lot of different parties in the book trade did not go away. And so what you found was Ingram getting into quite aggressively, but I think very smartly, into a period of innovation and experimentation on different ways to, as John Ingram says, to ensure that Ingram Book Company, and now that was called by a different name, currently Ingram Content Group, that it might remain relevant and not become irrelevant.
Right. Keel, this point about regulatory bodies and something becoming too big and therefore swallowing up competition, etc., isn't that almost de rigueur now for the publishing industry? As in, the biggest publishing houses have become these massive conglomerates with having acquired steadily all the independent presses that were around, or many of them. And so now we have like the big five, who actually are the only ones with real clout in the market. So why is that all right then? How is that something that you, as someone who's been part of the business and close observer of what's going on, is that something that would worry you, or is that something you think that has actually helped grow the industry?
Well, it certainly became a reality. Apart from what anybody like me might think about it, it became certainly a reality in the trade. But you're reminding me of one of the benefits, one of the most really spectacularly interesting parts of this story, and that the family business captures, I hope, and that is that in taking a alternate route to the future, if I may, Ingram wound up developing, in fact, innovations. One that particularly comes to mind is Lightning Source, the on-demand provider that is now a global business, of course, and the effect of that in time, together with other innovations in the trade, was to I would say democratize the number and the variety of decision makers in the world who can choose to bring a book public. It was and arguably is no longer a question of the the five sisters, or the ever how we would characterize the principal publishers, who we knew in the world at that time, which actually constituted significant gatekeepers in the trade. Access to market for an author, for other publishers, was very much influenced by their presence. Now we have a much broader array of innovative people who are publishers and editors and authors, certainly, who can bring their stories to the world. And I think that's one of the breakthroughs of what an important part of the significance of this story. And so, a lot of us are interested in, well, I mean, how then do you do that? Well, you turn to print on demand, for example, or you turn on to the principal providers of that. You have Lightning Source. You have Ingram Spark, which is particularly geared to what authors are trying to say to the world, and how you can get that out. And so, and also it happens a lot faster. It's much faster.
No, it's changed the way we do business, even in India. I mean, the print on demand facility has completely allowed us to rethink our backlist and how we can keep books going, and just allow books to stay in print where we may not have been able to in the past. So like for our business, no doubt about it. Will you tell us that little story of how John just happened to come upon this idea and how you worked on making it reality?
The idea of this book?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I mean, because you talk about how he just sort of looked at it and said, like, why can't we print a book at a time? It was literally as simple as that almost. And then it had to be worked on to bring it to this point where it's actually something the whole world is using.
Right. Well, John himself likes to say that in the beginning, when nobody much knew what print on demand meant, and so forth, that this was for a period, quote, John's little problem. Of course, he was an heir to the family business. His father had established quite an industrial player in different fields, and it had taken on a project to establish what became a book company, and again, quite an important book company, essentially as a favor to a friend. I mean, this is a fellow who, the friend was Mr. Jack Stambaugh, who had been an executive in academia. He was a ranking official at Vanderbilt University here in Nashville, and gotten to know the family quite well. Well, Mr. Stambaugh was about to retire. He talked to Mr. Bronson Ingram, who is the father of John Ingram, and said, well, I would like to Ingram. And this became Ingram, the sort of founding entity that became Ingram Book Company in due course. And I think that that's worth pausing on just a moment, because as you know, so many businesses that become important to lots more people, in many cases begin with that kind of process. It's an idea, begins with an idea. In this case, it was what I call a favor to a friend. But then it becomes quite relevant. Now, along the way, it takes a lot of smart thinking, a lot of timely decision making, being savvy or hip, to developments in the world, certainly, that affect the market. But the whole notion of innovation, I think if there's any one thing about that the book, The Family Business, is about, it's how things begin and how they develop, and how sometimes simple ideas can become something great and globally relevant. And along the way, it does take smart thinking and timely decision making, and I think that is a story of interest to lots of people. I mean, this is I appreciate that my book has become interesting and relevant to a lot of folks in the book trade, publishers, editors, authors, certainly, and ultimately booksellers and so forth. But it's also turned out to be of interest to lots of people, who are more generally starting with an interest in establishing what will be a small business to start, but then small businesses can become great.
John, two things I wanted to ask you, which is one, a lot of this story of growing the business, the book part of it for Ingram, had to do with a long gestation period and getting to that point of profitability over many years. It was never something that just took off. I mean, I'm talking about Lightning Source, for instance. Is the reason that this could be done because Ingram had so many other successful businesses and therefore deep pockets, they could afford to wait? Was it something that they saw as risky, but they needed to sustain for other reasons? I mean, you talk about the fact that Martha Ingram was very involved in the art scene and with philanthropy and so on. And did books somehow have that attraction of cultural capital as well for this family? I am not sure that I encountered any conversations around this in the book itself, but I was curious to know.
Yes, that's a very good question, and very relevant to this story, and I think to a lot of people, because yes, the Ingram family had been at work in its different businesses in Nashville and Tennessee for some years, and in the process have been able to establish wealth within the family that created a, one might say, a pool of capital, available capital, that as they would go about their decision making internally, quarter by quarter, that they could choose to apply to new ideas, and this also characterizes the Ingram story over a period of time. The other thing, and I do think Lightning Source is a good example of this, that I think it's probably told for the first time in The Family Business, my book, that it actually took 7 years for Ingram to show a profit in the Lightning Source business. Now, that is not possible in many cases. I mean, you don't have that kind of, what I call patient capital. But the fact that this relates to the structure, the corporate structure of this business, Ingram was in fact a privately held business. It did not have the sort of market pressures that public companies face, where you have the, the well-known routine of having to give quarterly progress reports to market analysts, and all, any of whom on any day could affect the way the world is seeing your enterprise. Well, the Ingram family chose not to go that way. In fact, to keep the business privately held, and that's a very relevant part of this story. But the fact is, most businesses are not publicly traded companies, and if you can just establish a pool of enterprise capital, that's usually one of the key things to try to accomplish early. So there was this patience within the system, although John will tell you, and he relates in the chapters of this book relating to Lightning Source, that it was not easy, that there was not unanimity in the boardroom, so to speak, for the longest time. And of course now, as John also says, today the story of Lightning Source is seen internally and externally as a thing that everybody involved helped to accomplish. And I think so. We have here some lessons for entrepreneurs, as well as for publishers and editors and authors who are themselves entrepreneurs. So I think this. Someone mentioned that the book, The Family Business, might well wind up on the shelves of business school libraries. And that would be a happy development for me, who wrote it, of course.
Yeah, I just think it has a lot of stories, but also a lot of lessons. And many of those lessons, I think, have to do with the way the culture of integrity, of working together, of describe as a team when they have to, that sort of family culture along with the family business, that seems to have driven Ingram forward most of the time. Is that something, I hear a lot of people talking about this these days and saying, oh, this family culture sort of thing is just collegial and boring, and let's talk about the modern corporate culture, which is so much more efficient and less emotional in its approach to business, less therefore troublesome, and less dependent on people and charisma, but more on systems. This book suggests that maybe that's not necessarily true, that here's a really good formula for success based on the family business and the family culture idea. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, in fact, that is my personal deepest interest in this story. That
right.
that we that it's not. It is to a point about systems, but the systems, particularly the ones that work well and famously, had to be created, had to be established by to the current needs. And I think that is likewise a story here that is a hopeful one for lots of people, that it's all about people. It's all about understanding what folks, what people need, what they want, what they particularly authors and publishers and others in the book trade, what they're trying to accomplish. A lot of Ingram people that I have met over the years are very much book people. That means many came from careers as booksellers into this aspect of the business. Some had been librarians, and some had in fact been publishers. And so it takes a lot of savvy about how that field works, how it might work better, and then the systems that must be created. I mean, the story of Ingram's systems for you know, from book code numbers, you know, all the way through how delivery, supply chains work and need to work and ought to work. And those are very important, but it takes a driving vision. I think the other thing your question reminds me of is the role of the person with the entrepreneurial spirit and also the leadership responsibility. And all of that combined really does take a sort of patient view, certainly an aggressive, competitive view, but one that helps keep an organization as it grows, in particular, true to the founding vision. And what are we trying to do here? And what are the main things we need to master, and that we need to communicate to the market, to the world? And I hope people enjoy this set of stories.
Knock, knock. Karthika, hi. Sorry for butting in. It's a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Just wanted to remind you, you have about 5 minutes to wrap up, please. So in case someone has questions, they can post that in the Q&A box.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, so I'm having to do this hatchet job. Sorry. 5 minutes.
No, well, let me say.
I'll put on my glasses and read them.
No, but there aren't any questions, but you could invite the audience to just speak up, unmute and speak up, or put it in the question box.
I appreciate the timekeeper. I can go on for hours about this, and I've been known to. So you're
no, and we could keep listening to you for hours too, but people in the way waiting, you know, people wait. So yes, you have 5 minutes, Karthika. Maybe a couple of last questions.
So I'm just going to ask one last question then, which is to do with your global business, or rather the Ingram global business. I know that I remember seeing some material about Ingram trying to work with Indian publishers or retailers. I can't remember the details, some years back, but I don't think very much happened after that. So I'm really curious to know if you have any insights into Ingram and India.
Well, there are lots of people connected to Ingram, the business, that know much more than I do. I mean, I'm a writer. I've tried to understand this and appreciate its scale and communicate that. But I do know that very profoundly that that India, Asia more broadly, these are very important parts of the world. That there are lots of people who want to participate in, you know, what I call the book trade. That it's very important. And this is the one thing, the global growth, and particularly into India, has been an important activity on the part of Ingram Content Group. And there, you know, I mentioned Mr. Mike Shatskin earlier as we began, and he's on the program elsewhere today with the conference. But you know, Mike in particular is so knowledgeable about how that growth has come about, and in the embrace of the world on the part of Ingram. So there's a lot more to that answer than we probably have time for.
Okay, right. Okay, that's fair enough. If there aren't any questions, then I guess I should just wrap up by thanking Keel for this conversation. Rather early in the morning, I imagine, for you, though it's late evening for us. Thank you to the Bangalore Festival for inviting us to be part of this conversation. And, you know, I don't know if I would have found this book on my own, unless someone pointed it to me or told me about it. And I'm just very glad that I got to read it. I did because of this festival, and because Ben was kind enough to send me a copy. I'm really hoping that there will be a lot more that Ingram can do in this country and help us change a lot of things that need changing in India as well in the book trade. So thank you, Keel. Thank you very much. And over to you for the last words.
Well, my only regret is that because of, you know, how the world is now, and the pandemic that that we were not able to do this in person. I know each of you would prefer that also, as would I.
Yes.
And so perhaps someday we can do it in that mode as we like the best. I just want to say again that this story what it says as a case study of what of how important the entrepreneur is, the one who is able not only to champion an idea organizationally and to bring it about, but to keep it sustained over a period of time, over a period of years. In the case of Ingram, 50 plus years now. But this is how things happen. This is how important ideas take root. And I think it's a story about that every bit as much as it's a story about books. And I would thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Super.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karthika. Thanks, Keel.
Thank
Lovely
you.
conversation.